Good morning, my name is Sally Morris-Pritchard and I'm a Committee Services Officer for Conwy Council. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, which is a virtual meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live stream fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind you that translation facilities are available, and if you want to make use of this facility, please click on the Audio Settings tab and select English. For those wishing to speak, please press the Push to Speak tab at the bottom of your screen. Do not use the yellow hand function. This should be used if you want to come in on a point of order. In order to maintain your place in the speaker queue, when asking a question, please leave your microphone on until you've received a response and asked any supplementary questions. I expect everyone present and participating in the meeting to conduct themselves appropriately and be respectful to one another. Okay, so moving on to the agenda. So unfortunately, we are not quorate due to not having a teacher representative, although she has tried to join. Unfortunately, she's not had the link. Therefore, we're only able to appoint a chair for this meeting only at this present time. So can I please have a proposer? Frank?
We're not hearing you. We're not hearing you.
I'm not able to hear you, Frank. Unfortunately, are you on mute? No, we're not hearing Councillor Frank, unfortunately.
Frank, the microphone button to the right of the orange centre of the screen at the bottom, have you muted there?
Or if you click on settings, Frank, and make sure it's connected to the correct headset. So the mute button is to the far right at the bottom of the screen. If there's a line through that, that means you're muted. No. Okay. Can I move on to Hugh then, who's also got his hand up? We're not hearing Hugh either, unfortunately. Are you muted, Hugh? Bottom right of your screen? No. Audio, if you click on audio settings, make sure the volume is turned up. Or click on settings and make sure that it's connected to the correct headset or device that you're using. Reverend Garnett, did you want to come in?
I'm just happy to propose Roger as the chair for this meeting.
Okay, so we're hearing you, you see, so it's not an issue with the system. So okay, so that's a proposer for Roger. Do we have a seconder?
I'll happily
second. Okay, so obviously we're not quorate, but if we can have a show of hands, so if we do that en masse, because obviously we haven't got the 3 committees. Yeah, anybody against? And any abstentions? No. Okay, so Roger, you're appointed as chair for this meeting only, so we won't bother with the vice chair appointment. We'll defer that to the next meeting unless Sian appears. I'll hand over to you, Roger.
Okay, can I give a warm welcome anyway, as well to Robin Miller, who's actually attending his first meeting, and Councillor Anthony Bertolo, the Mayor of Llandudno, who's also joining us for the very first time. So good to have you both on board. Thank you very much indeed. Apologies for absence, Sally.
Yes, I've had apologies from Councillor Gwenol Ellis, Hayley Jones, who's a teacher representative, and also Councillor Aaron Wynne, who is hoping to join us. He's the new Cabinet Member for Education.
Right, okay. Thank you for that. And having been appointed just for this meeting as well, I just want to emphasise what I said in the annual report, that this is my last year, so that presumably I shouldn't presume this, but you reappoint me at the next meeting for this year. You need to be thinking during the course of this year about the successor and how you would like to be involved in future. So that's just a note of warning there. Okay. There are no declarations of interest, are there? No. I have no urgent matters. So can we come to the minutes, Sally?
Yeah, again, you can't approve the minutes as you're not quorate.
Right. Okay. Well, the next item is an update on the vacancies. And this was very much down to Lowry to follow through on. We desperately need a secondary head teacher representative. I mean, to have this meeting without one, it just doesn't make sense whatsoever. We have one vacancy for a primary head teacher as well. And we were pursuing, you might remember from previous meetings, a governor representative. And we were waiting to find out whether the Governor Association had met since our last meeting, because Larry again was going to pursue that. So we expected feedback on those items from Lowry at this meeting. She has indicated that Gwenel Ellis will be attending on her behalf in future, but Gwenel isn't here. So we're going to have to defer that, sadly. So matters arising in terms of your minutes. First thing is the school questionnaire that we'd actually been pursuing. And I'm going to pass it over to Phil on that, both primary and secondary.
The questionnaires are ready to go. They have been finalised. We worked on them in the summer with the network. They were happy. They didn't like the format of the REMW, RE quality mark examples that we're using. They wanted to use them. They wanted them to reflect what schools would and pupils would benefit, I think, from the curriculum for Wales rather than from a more generic RE curriculum. So they are ready to go. I just want to meet with Gweno to see how and what's the most appropriate way of getting them out to schools. Mainly because we've not been very successful in previous questionnaires. When I've been talking with other local authority staff from other local authorities, they just feel that they are not necessarily going to give us the return or the information that we want, because we'd need it from as many people as possible. So I'll have a chat with Gweno about how we provide that. On the back of that, though, something that we were talking about with Hugh last week when we were talking about the action plan for next year, and that is how can we be the most useful SACRE to schools? And the questionnaires the schools felt were really useful, but there's a difference between supporting schools to gain the information to improve RE and then the monitoring that we do as a SACRE. And there's a fine line between the two. And obviously we'd like some input from schools and from pupils on what RE looks like within Conwy, what RVE looks like within Conwy, but also these questionnaires would be extremely useful from a school's perspective in being able to gain a bit of pupil voice and pupils' thoughts towards RVE in them creating their own action plans within the school. So that said, I'll take both of those things to Gweno when I meet with her, hopefully in the next week or so, and then we can get the questionnaires. Well, we can proceed with the questionnaires as the local authority thinks it'll be best.
Okay, so we've got an action for Phil on with regard to that. For those of you who are new, we put the questionnaire out quite a long while ago, and it took us almost 18 months to actually get what we thought was a reasonably comprehensive feedback from the schools. So we'll proceed on that. Any questions on that at all from anybody? Any thoughts? Okay. We were planning to have a sixth form conference, which was actually being planned in conjunction with the National Centre for RE at Bangor. So The next item is to do with our relationship with them. So over to you, Phil.
We talk a lot about a lot of things in a SACRI meeting, and at the point that we have a conversation, they seem like a really good idea, and the sixth form conference is one of those. But if we were to ask schools, one, are they able in terms of capacity to be able to provide transport for the children, the cost that obviously would entail, and whether there would be whether the schools would want to do that in the first place is something that we hadn't done. So we thought, and you know, rightly so, a sixth form conference would be a really, really good idea. But if the schools don't want to do that, then we can put on a conference and nobody will attend for whatever reason. Maybe that's capacity or cost. And so just because we sort of had that conversation, somebody posed it to me, are the schools up for a sixth form conference? And it's one question that we couldn't answer. So rather than going ahead with a sixth form conference, and again, in collaboration with the local authority, it might be better if we were to seek what schools would like in terms of things like that. And then if there was a will from the schools, then we could work with NCREW to be able to put on a sixth form conference. They're still up for that. They've got a brilliant venue in the summer. They've got lots of rooms around Bangor University, and the university will offer those to the NCREW, to the centre, and to whoever wants to go for free to be able to put on some really good activities. But the question is whether the schools would and are able or capable to release the learners to actually go to those conferences. So we can put stuff on, and NCREW are happy, really happy to provide dates and venues. They won't provide coaches, but schools might be willing, if they've got small cohorts of A-level pupils, to be able to sort of take the school minibus. So I think we probably need to ask the schools if it's something that they want to go ahead with, and on the response that we get from that, then decide and work with NCREW to put it on in the summer. The other issue with that then is that the year 12s will have gone up to year 13, so they'll be around, but year 13 will have moved on. So it will have to be probably a year 12 going into year 13 conference rather than a whole A-level, just because of the time of year that Bangor would be able to offer the conference.
Okay, for those of you who remember that we'd actually already had an offer from this school, John Bright, with regard to hosting this conference, and they've withdrawn since then, basically down to pressures on the school. I just wonder, Phil, whether if we were to produce in conjunction with Bangor a draft programme which could go out to schools, that might seem more attractive in the sense that they'll have something concrete to consider whether it was actually worth sending their students to.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Did you read that?
Yes, you can hear me.
He was just testing the system. Sorry, he's now able to speak. Yeah.
We're not waiting. Are we waiting?
No, I don't think we can carry on.
Right. Okay. The other thing that we had actually been doing with the National Centre is that trying to form a closer link for our schools with a mentoring program that they're actually developing. And you Phil, you've had a meeting with Josh, haven't you, recently?
Yes, yeah. And that's going ahead. It's about publicising it, really. So I'm sort of waiting for little posters and things from them. They have a very active Facebook page, so most schools can access most of what they're doing through the Facebook page. The website's very slow. It doesn't have any detail about a program or how people would sign up with a mentoring system or sixth form conferences or anything. But they do an awful lot of stuff, but it's generally put out by social media. And again, I'm not necessarily the best at picking those up. So I keep on asking for like a timetable. One of the things that we will be doing is that they are going to be writing the article for the newsletter in the spring for us. So they will hopefully give us a bit of an outline of how schools can access a lot of their material and training through the newsletter in the spring.
And given the fact that this is a priority in our next year, looking forward to it towards next year, we will be considering when we present the new management plan to actually cementing that relationship and integrating it into what we do here by inviting a co-option from the centre to join this particular committee. Any questions? Any thoughts on that? Okay. On the promotion of SACRO, we've had in production now for, I think, for 9 months now, a leaflet. Can you tell us where we've actually got to with that one? One thing we did agree at the last meeting was that when it was produced, it would go out with the annual report.
Okay, yeah, sorry. It is written, it needs translating. And then from a meeting that we had regarding the next action plan, it was suggested that there's a QR code that can go on there for schools to suggest support that the SACRA can provide. And that would be useful on the leaflet. Because if the leaflet's going out and we can say, is there any support or ideas or thoughts that the local authority schools have regarding our work as SACRA, then there's a direct port of call they can use. So a QR code and a link on the newsletter will be important. So yeah, it's ready to go. I'll add that final QR code, and then once it's translated, I'll get it to Sally, who can send it round to everybody, and then I'll work with Gwen on how best to let schools know that it's around.
Okay, thanks. Any questions on that? Okay. The promotion of the SACRA video. Again, those of you who are new, WASACA actually initiated a video on the work on OVE in the curriculum, and it involved pupils, in fact, in putting that together. It was shown and shared at one of our meetings, and it was well received. And Lowry agreed to go away and to actually come back with some suggestions as to how we could promote that. As she's not here, I think we're going to have to defer that.
It's been sent. It was sent in the last meeting as well. So it's gone in the newsletter when we sent the newsletter out, and it's also gone out in the school's update letter that goes out weekly.
Oh, that's good. Okay. And Tanya, who's not here today, in fact, was responsible for organising the production of that. In terms of inspection reports, we've never had access, I don't think, Phil, have we, to Church in Wales inspection reports previously?
No.
You were exploring that.
Yeah, sorry. There was a pause because of they've not done them since COVID. Estin obviously launched their inspection schedule, and they are still catching up with schools since before COVID. But the Section 50 reports, there have been some trials. If you were literally on Google and search Section 50 reports, Church in Wales, there is a page now where they're being uploaded. There are 3, I've just checked before this meeting, there are 3 that have gone up within the St Asaph diocese. St George, just the other side of Abergele, their report has gone up on there, plus 2 others, one of them in Wrexham. I can't remember which the other school was. But we have one school in the Conwy local authority, and their Section 50 report has gone up on the Section 50 section of the Church in Wales website. So please have a look at that at your own leisure. We'll work with Louise Williams, who's the new Director of Education for St Asaph, as to how we report those, or what do we report? Do we report in the same way that we report when we report the Estin? And that is at the end of the year, just do everybody's all in one go. I think that would seem more appropriate rather than having a separate item in every term, just on the Section 50 reports. Maybe looking at good practice that could be shared I don't know, but a conversation around when it is. Obviously, we're not going to be Cora, but it would be worth having a conversation about what we do with the Section 50 reports. But obviously, Louise would need to be part of that conversation as well.
So we deferred a decision on that, I think, down the line. But one thing it's probably worth noting, we've complained in previous meetings here about the lack of information that we actually get in ESTIN reports. Section 15 reports, in fact, I'm sure Colette will agree, are going to be pretty thorough in terms of recommendations that they would make and so forth about good practice. So we might have a lot more feedback there. We've had, as you will know, that we have done a fair bit of lobbying very recently with regards to Key Stage 4 provision, and our concerns, in fact, that OVE was going to get lost. There's no new, for those of you who are new, there's no new short course at GCSE. The full GCSE, in fact, is a very, very academic course, and what's being developed is a brand new skills suite. The actual nature of that is reasonably clear because it's going to build on some of the previous ideas, but it's what it actually covers has yet to be determined. We were very concerned that our ability to monitor the old Key Stage 4, years 10 and 11, what OVE was taking place in schools was becoming very difficult. And we lobbied. We actually had a couple of assembly members, in fact, on our behalf, making the case. Spoke in fact with the minister, and there was a correspondence. We sent a letter as well from this particular group. I also sent a personal letter, and at the last meeting we agreed that all our correspondence will be forwarded to WASACA in order to help them with their lobbying. And I've had a response to that as well from Libby Jones, who's the Assistant Secretary to WASACA. I won't read all of it to you, but just the relevant part. The correspondence was reported to members of the WASACA Executive Committee for their information at a recent executive meeting. I can assure you that the issues raised in your correspondence have been followed up with the Welsh Government colleagues and are recurring agenda items which WASAC and Welsh Government discuss at their termly meetings. And there's actually going to be an update on that in the next WASAC meeting, which takes place on the 19th of November. One of the things that I was particularly concerned about, and I highlighted to them, was that in terms of the response that we actually had from Qualification Wales, there were inconsistencies in between what I was being told and what the minister had clearly been told. So we were hoping that they would be picked up at WASACA level. We spent a lot of time on that last meeting. So any further thoughts and questions? I mean, to some extent, there's a political with a small p.
Can I just come in really briefly? Phil, are you typing and clicking because it's coming through really loudly on the microphone?
Sorry, I am.
Thank you. Okay, just thought I'd pick that up. Thank you.
Okay, so
I'm beeping.
Sorry,
any
Roger, can I apologise? I'm going back to the previous item. I did click on to speak, but we're obviously not quite used to that yet, instead of hands up. Just to point out that our Catholic schools have well and truly started their Section 50 inspections and have probably been going for the last 2 years. Again, those reports are up on our diocesan website. However, neither of the schools in Conwy have been inspected probably since 2017-18. But another point to clarify, I think at some point in the distant past, these inspection reports must have been discussed at SACRA, because I can remember being ahead in Conwy Authority and receiving a very nice letter from SACRA congratulating me on my inspection. So I think there must have been a little bit of a history somewhere along the line of these reports being discussed at SACRA.
Yeah, well, that clearly precedes my time, so it goes back a long time, Colette. But thanks for sharing that as well. Any further thoughts on the issues that were raised in the letter to Qualification Wales before we move on? Just a reminder, if you want to speak, you need to press the red button at the bottom of the screen. Right, RV and governors, again, with Gwynel not being here, Phil, can you arrange for pick that up as an issue at your meeting?
Yeah.
To have with Gwynel with regard to that, and
I'll put it as a note. Yeah.
And the Teacher Voice project.
They've received the first.
Can you explain for new people what it was?
Yeah. WASACRE, in conjunction with St Mary's Centre, have created a questionnaire for teachers to gain a bit of an idea on how well they're doing with the curriculum for Wales and religion, values and ethics within the curriculum for Wales. They have reported that they've started to look at that data. They didn't give numbers, I don't think, but they did say that I think they have representatives from nearly every local authority across Wales and from nearly every sector in every local authority in Wales. So they're quite happy with numbers. Obviously, they could always do with more, but I think from a statistical analysis perspective, they've got enough information, they've got enough numbers to be able to get some accurate data, or to data that they can make some good assumptions from. I'm not sure when they'll start generating reports or papers based on that data, but I'm sure it can't be that far away, because I think they started, or they used the data from July. I think they started crunching the data, so I'm hoping that we'll expect some information from the report soon.
Okay, well, Tanya's not here, but presumably there'll be some kind of report giving feedback that we can actually look at.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Any further questions on any of those items before we move on? Okay. Key Stage 4 qualifications. We've just touched on that actually in the matters arising, because I was explaining the position with regard to GCSE. I mean, the crucial issue is this skills suite, and whether that will cover what we would deem to be OVE as we see it, encompassing all the things that we actually know to be important in OVE, and that's in process. Can you tell us? You've been involved in this, I think, through NatFra, is it?
Sort of. The skills suite. Obviously, we've lost the short course GCSE. The short course is continuing in England. There was a concern that the short course supported statutory religion, values and ethics at Key Stage 4 for year 10 and 11. Key Stage 4 doesn't exist, but for year 10 and 11. And then without the short course and with the sort of the academic rigor for the full course, actually there is not much that's available to support statutory RVE. The skills suite could be that. It could provide schools with an opportunity to provide some good RVE, and it still go towards qualifications for our learners, which obviously is quite positive for lots of schools. So the skills suite, they've got 3 units. They equate, I think, to about 30 contact hours in a particular year. So I think it's 10 continent. I might be wrong there, but it will meet the requirements if all 3 of these units are taken by the learners. WJC and Agored are 2 examination providers that are bidding for those at the moment, and they're still going through the bidding process, I think. So WJC and Agored will provide Qualifications Wales with an overview of what they think should go in the skills suite, and then Qualifications will make a decision on who gets that contract. The understanding, though, of the wider aspect of the skill suite and RVE and statutory expectations, I think is an important one here. And we're not sure if either Qualifications Wales, WJC or Agored really understand the complexities or the nuances that are in there. So we're yet to see what they produce and what it looks like. I put myself forward as a reviewer for the skill suite, and I was expecting to, because of my sort of background, to be part and parcel of looking at the WJEC and the Agored stuff. Qualifications Wales have decided that that's too big, and they are not employing anybody to look at those particular units. And that's not just the 3 units for RVE, that's some of these other bigger units as well. And they've given the reviewers much more smaller units to look at, and they're keeping them in-house. So Qualifications Wales believes that it's got enough expertise within Qualifications Wales to look at the things that WJEC and Agored provide, and they'll be able to make a decision, they believe, with enough sort of knowledge. We're hoping that's true. I can't comment on whether that's right or wrong, but hopefully we'll be able to see some specifications. The Agored qualification at the moment will cease from 2027. So lots of schools have moved over to the Religion and Worldviews qualification, level 2 qualification, so an equivalent of a GCSE. It's portfolio based, it's accessible, it covers lots of the things that RVE covers, but that won't be available from 2027. And we're hoping that the skills suite will provide some sort of continuity. The problem with all of that, though, is that it's still change for schools. So schools will have to do something different, even if it's sort of along the lines of the Agored qualification. It will still obviously be different because it needs to meet the skill suite specifications. So unfortunately, it's just change again for teachers at quite a pressurized time. But that is what it is. What it is.
You might remember as well that given the difficulties in this area, we'd actually encourage schools and head teachers to actually pick up on the Agored qualification while there was a gap there, which was really felt quite strongly by secondary head teachers, and that's been in process. But our really big concern here is that we end up with a curriculum at Key Stage 4, which doesn't cover the whole of what we would consider to be RVE. And the thought that they will say, well, you can do a little bit in English or a bit in history or a bit in geography, and you find it there. But actually monitoring and knowing what was going on in the classroom, which is one of our main roles, would be almost impossible. And I can say this, I don't have faith in Qualification Wales to do this, because they insisted on the introduction of a short course, which was actually highly academic and has led to a massive reduction in the number of students wanting to pick up on that as well in the past. So this is a major issue, and I think one of the things that we need to do, and I'd like some thoughts from folk on this because it is crucial, but whatever is produced and we have it in front of us, I think we need to actually analyse this and have a really close look at it, or maybe a group from this, from SACRE, to actually take a very detailed look at it. But, Hugh, I know you've got big concerns about that, yes?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about what is going on at the moment. From the general point of view, and RVE, I'm going to speak in Welsh now. Dwi'n poeni'n arw am hwn rwan, oherwydd bod 'na fwlch efo'r agored yma, a gan bod yr arholiad mor academaidd i natur, dwi'm yn meddwl bod ni'n ateb y cwestiwn o gwbl lle mae sgiliau yn y cwestiwn chwaith, ynde. Hefyd, os da ni'n darllen yr agreed syllabus
Well, I don't know about other people, but my buttons are functioning and I'm not hearing any translation whatsoever. I'm to the word you've said in English before.
Is everybody else hearing the translation? Yes. Roger, can you just make sure it's still on English if you click on...
Yeah, on English.
Yes, on English.
So click on audio settings, English, and just make
Yeah.
sure the levels
Yeah.
are correct. Yeah.
Yeah, we've done that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll speak. I'll
No,
speak in English if you can sort it out. I'll speak in English. I'll start again then.
Can we just try it again? Sorry, translator. Could you just say a few words?
Helo, dach chi'n clywed i?
Yeah. Everybody else is hearing it. Roger, have you changed anything?
No, we haven't. I mean, Phil's with me. We're looking at the screen. It's all done. All the audio settings. Yeah.
Oh, you can sort it out. I'll speak in English then. I'm very worried about this at the moment. You know, it's moving on with the WJC in such academic terms, and nothing for the rest of the agored group, and the differentiation and so on in the curriculum, and nothing until 2027. What makes me more worried is that the documents coming through, even the agreed syllabus and whatever comes out of the skills now, is so very, very general. Very, very general. That they're just words, in fact, and they could be descriptions of the general curriculum in Wales rather than anything involved with subjects or RVE and so on. So very indefinite. And now we are creating a population in school now of children who are saying, well, we don't need that anymore. There's nothing there for us anymore. We're finishing now. We've chosen our subjects, and therefore we're saying goodbye to such things. So the way we're going, as I said, I'm very worried about this now. It's just generalisation. And as a representative of the Presbyterian Church in Wales, I find it also a step towards secularization as well, really. And I'm worried from that side as well. There's no depth for it in any religion, I don't think, anyway, or any other agreed philosophy either. They're just words at the moment. Okay,
Yeah,
Phil,
no,
I've said my say now.
I think this is a trend that we've been facing anyway, right across the curriculum since the introduction of the Donaldson report. Because I was only noting last night that in terms of the Donaldson report, for instance, the definition.
Oh, has Roger dropped out? Bear with me a sec. I think he might. Yeah, he's dropped out of the meeting. This is
What did I say?
going from bad to worse today, isn't it? Okay, if we just give him a second to rejoin, and then hopefully he can pick up where he left off. I'll just try and give him a quick call in case he's having issues. Bear with me a sec. There we go. I think Roger's rejoined us.
Yeah, this is quite a morning in terms of technical things. Yeah, absolutely. But picking up on that, I was about to say that the Donaldson report, its definition of spirituality, for instance, actually has no mention whatsoever of the supernatural in any way. So we are facing, I think, I would call not an overt attack on RVE in the curriculum with the advance of secularism, but it's certainly happening just very, very gradually in different ways. So I agree with you on that here. I'd like to invite further comments.
What I'm worried about, Phil, is that you know, people like Phil are not going to be involved in an expert in these matters, in the skills and so on, and saying that there is enough expertise in Curriculum Wales. I'm not sure of that either.
Well, I certainly agree with you in terms of what's happened historically here on that one. I mean, we have a lot of sorry, James.
I just wanted to ask whether we have a timeline for when these documents will be available for us to look at.
I can only say from my experience, the documentation that I'll be looking at, obviously it's not from WJC or Agored. I'm getting that on the 12th of December. I don't know if that's an individual deadline for me from the particular provider that I'll be assessing or reviewing. I'm not sure. So I know that this term, the specifications and the details of those will be coming in to whoever they will be that will be looking at them. But I couldn't tell. My deadline is by the spring term to have that ratified and any information back to the provider, who will then obviously either ignore my recommendations or update whatever it is based on my recommendations. The process is currently rolling on, but I haven't got a particular deadline on when those specifications will be available for us to have a look at. I don't think there will be a consultation period. I can't imagine that there will be. So I think the specifications will be published when they publish them for schools to say this is what you will be teaching. I don't think, I might be wrong, but I don't think that there will be a consultation period for the general public to look. There's too much there. There's too many specifications. There's too many things to look at. What they generally do is they ask us to comment on the framework in which the providers will then create their specifications, and that's already been done.
Yeah, and we'd already suggested to them in correspondence that they actually take a fresh look at that they defer it for 12 months, and they take a look at the whole issue and actually pull in the stakeholders that aren't part of this process. As Phil said, they're maintaining it completely in-house at the moment. So it becomes a fait accompli when it goes out to schools. And the first chance that we will have to do anything about it is when it goes out to school and we see what's in there. And in a sense, that's already in place, and schools then being asked to amend it or change it because we're not happy with it, or however we pursue that, is not going to be easy. So it's a really, really worrying situation. And this is for, you know, the whole cohort of students in the upper school and secondary schools.
Reverend Garnett has his hand up.
So just to reflect on that, Roger, so what we're saying then is really there isn't much we can do until it's been, until the specifications have been published.
Yeah, we can't criticize something that we don't know exactly what's in it, and they've refused the involvement of outside agencies, which should have included Phil actually in that particular process.
Sorry, can I chip in here?
Yeah.
I think what we can do, though, is write to Qualifications Wales, because they are the ones that are going to be looking at the specifications. And I think that we should be reminding them that the skills suite would be ideally placed to take up the slack that has been left as the result of the short course disappearing. So I think that we could do that, But to say that they need the 3 units, there are rumours that Agored are only using one of those units for an RVE specific content, and then the other 2 are a bit sort of woolly. So I think that what we could do is both definitely write to Qualifications Wales to say that when you're assessing them, please look at 3 units, not just the 1, because we think we need these hours to meet our statutory requirements. And then possibly maybe just send that to Agored and to WJEC for information that this is what we've sent to both those. So they are in the designing process at the moment. So maybe I hadn't thought about that. Maybe if we can influence that at the moment, that would be quite positive.
Okay, now that's a very positive suggestion. And Robin, you've been involved in politics at a much higher level than any of us here. Do you think it would be a good idea to copy that into the 2 Assembly members that have actually been following this issue on our behalf?
You'll be the better judge of what's appropriate locally. I would just make one remark by way of introduction as much as anything else, and following off of your kind remarks about being involved in politics at other level. I wouldn't necessarily call it higher or better for sure. It's just a different level. But what I would say is that what I saw, and over 25 years, 20 years in local government and 5 years in Parliament, is that there are people who do have a very definite secular agenda. And we should be clear about that, because they are pursuing it deliberately and intentionally. And I confess, as a Christian for, nearly 50 years now, at first my attitude was, well, we can tolerate and we can accommodate and we can make room for all sorts of things. But my view has hardened over the last decade or so to be very much that we need to be on the front foot on these things, and we need to assert the importance and value of religious education into a world which is saying there is no value in these things, that it's fairies at the bottom of the garden, whatever flavour, whatever type of spirituality you might think of. There are those who just dismiss it out of hand and are working to do that, who work to eradicate it from curriculum, who work to eradicate it from public life. And I think that's a great loss. It's a tragedy. It's a great loss. I think it's a great error. And as a country, Wales has a very, very rich tradition of the Christian faith. The Celtic Christian roots and origins are quite distinct and different from those in England. They're part of our distinctiveness as a nation in Wales, but also the UK as a whole. Its place in the world is rooted in part on its Christian traditions. And these things are really important. And one of the reasons I think it's important to speak about it is because there are those in some parts of the political spectrum who are trying to make it theirs. And that also is an error which we need to avoid. So by way of introduction, that's why I'm involved in this. I'm very grateful, Roger, to your invitation and to colleagues here for accepting my part to play in it. And just in a local way is to say these things matter and important. And so looping all the way back to your original question, Roger, my instinct would be, yes, we need to share it with local assembly members. But generally, my view is we must not be embarrassed or modest or cautious about promoting the value and importance of these things. If the door doesn't open, we knock on it. If it still doesn't open, we knock harder.
Yeah, fully agree. Thanks very much for that contribution, Robin. I fully agree with that. Phil, am I right in thinking that this is quite ironic in the sense that isn't England in the process of reintroducing it across the whole of their own national curriculum?
Their short course is, it's not stopping. There was I think the issue a few years ago was they talked about unitized qualifications, so everything had to be done at the end of year 11 rather than how we've done it previously or continue to do. So there are year 10 and year 11 exams, but I think the short course has continued. There are A-level number drop in England and Wales, but it's more pronounced in Wales. We have a theory on why that may be. But yeah, it has been on the decline both in England and in Wales, but it seems to be a more marked decline in Wales than in England.
Right. Okay, well, it'll have to be endorsed later, but I'm actually going to make a proposal that we ask Phil to compose the letter to Qualification Wales on the basis that we've actually just previously discussed, and that he and I sign it, and that we send it off to Qualification Wales, and we also circulate to our 2 Assembly members who've been involved in the lobbying that we've actually done previously, expressing our concerns. And I do know that, what's Mr. Rowland's first name? Sam Rowland, in fact, is a member of a group of Assembly members who are all Christians, who are very aware of this and who meet. And maybe we could also ask him to actually share our concerns with that particular group, Phil.
Yeah.
Knocking on the door harder, as Robin has just suggested. Okay, so I want to make that. Sally, can I take any kind of vote on this?
We're not quorate, Roger, no, unfortunately.
So it just becomes a recommendation.
I mean, I can put it in the minutes.
A noted recommendation.
We can't officially pass it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think we'll get on and do it, though. I'm sorry. Otherwise, it's going to be too late anyway.
Oh, absolutely. That makes sense. But I'll note it in the minutes, but I won't put it as a anything that's been
just a
voted on.
recommendation. Yeah. Okay. This is a crucial issue. So, any further thoughts? We haven't got Sean, but Claire, you've actually been in the classroom recently. Have you got any thoughts on this?
I was only in primary classrooms, so I've not ever seen the qualifications side of it myself.
Right. Bronwyn, you were recently in the classroom at secondary level, weren't you?
Yes, so I wasn't teaching this is a subject, but my husband was, and I think one of the points that we need to consider is who schools choose to deliver something like a skills set, because I think there's a little bit too much leeway sometimes in the way you can deliver something, and I think we need people who have a Christian background or a religious background to be able to deliver this in the correct way, really, rather than making it more secular and sort of making it fit the ways of the world.
Yeah.
But we definitely do need something to replace a short course that will work to deliver, because the GCSE is far too difficult for a lot of the children.
Yeah, that's a concern we've shared many times, and also shared with Qualification Wales. But that's a key issue that's just been raised there, Phil. I mean, if it's a skills suite, and this is only part of a skills suite, are the chances, therefore, that even if the skills suite is actually better than we expect it to be, it's most likely to be delivered by teachers without an OVE qualification?
Yeah, but also Key Stage 4 is a very crowded space, and there is no statutory. There was never any statutory requirement to do the full or the short course GCSE. It just happened to be that the numbers were very high. I would argue that, especially in John Bright's, I didn't do the full the short course for everybody. I preferred to have a non-statutory RE lesson at Key Stage 4, but it wasn't examinable. But that's because I really liked to control the curriculum. I really liked to sort of take on the content that I wanted to deliver. It was very much within the agreed syllabus, but I had that ability to tailor it as I would like. But if there's a GCSE, then at least we know that it's meeting the statutory requirements. I think that's the argument. I was talking with a lady last couple of weeks ago, and she's convinced that if it's not done by an exam, it's not worth the paper it's written on. I would sort of disagree with that. I think you can be a good RE teacher, provide good content at Key Stage 4, and not have children do GCSEs or exams. But I think I'm in the minority there.
Yeah, and you're not driving the ship either. Head teachers want the points, basically.
So yeah, I think Key Stage 4 is very crowded, and so the skills suite, you could do one of the three, you could do all three, but it's very much down to the school as what they what they choose. I do think it's worth mentioning here, though. We discussed this with Hugh last week. Over the last few years, we've not reported on GCSE or A-level results at the request of Welsh Government, because they don't want schools to be compared with each other like for like, because cohorts are very different. Demographic is obviously very, very different. But I think there has been an oversight, because as well as reporting how many boys got a certain grade, we would also say that 70% of John Bright did a full course or a short course or whatever. And then if there were concerns that the pupil roll was dropping, we might write to a school and say, look, it's noticed that you dropped your GCSE last year. Can you tell us why? Now, we've not been able to do that because we've not published the data. And so I'm going to put this to a national panel, because I think this is an unforeseen consequence. They used that term. I think the unforeseen consequence of not reporting data is that we haven't really reported what schools are doing, because they have always been accountable when reporting the data, because if they were reducing numbers, we would spot that and we could write that. But because we've not kept an eye on data, we've not been able to write to schools to say, look, you've got a reducing roll on full GCSE. What is everybody else doing? So I'm going to bring that to Welsh Government, actually, through NatFrey, to say that obviously there is a reason that numbers at A-level are dropping. This could be one of them. Is there a way that we could report on provision, not report on results, but report on what schools are offering in which year group at stage 4 and stage 5.
Sorry, Phil's sound seems to have declined. I can't hear him properly.
Yeah, so I think that we could ask the local authority that we would publish provisional provision at key stage 4, not exam results at key stage 4, because that obviously would tell a school or let people know if the school's actually providing a GCSE or an A-level.
And yeah, and Bronwyn actually put a finger on, for those of you who are relatively new, the real difficulty, which was the fact that the short GCSE, which many students would have traditionally taken, had become incredibly academic and was not suitable for the full range of ability. And we pursued that as an issue and didn't have any success with it. They just decide what they want to do. I mean, I see there's a much bigger problem here, and the bigger problem is that in Wales we have only one examining board that we can actually use. It's a closed shop. There's no competition, and that's a recipe, I think, for me, for a lack of quality and a lack of thought. It's very different in England, where you can actually choose whichever examination board you want, appropriate to your students' needs. So that's been the cause of that, which is why the numbers significantly taking OBE have dropped. Agored stepped into the gap and produced something at least until 2027, but it's still a major issue for us. And on the issue of data, again, we're going back a couple of years now at least, but both Phil and I had a meeting with Lowry with regard to this, because SACRE had expressed its concern about the fact that they would have no data at all to actually look at in assessing schools' performance, irrespective of the context. And there was no give on that at all. But Phil, we do have an alternative route now to pursue with regard to collection of data, and it'll come out through our management plan. And I'm going to be asking Phil to actually pursue this with the local authority. Do you want to say anything at this stage or save it?
I've alluded to the fact that we'll ask for those numbers of cohorts that are doing GCSE and A-level rather than actually the results. And then we could publish the numbers of learners that are taking a GCSE and track the data that way.
Okay, well, we've got a recommendation particularly on this very, very important issue.
You've got a few hands up as well, Roger.
Yeah, Hugh.
I agree with what Stephen said. Just coming back to something what Phil said last week, is Eston going to have a thematic approach to this now, Phil?
I think it's on the cards. Yes, Estin are putting RVE. RVE has, so there is a spotlight from Welsh Government on RVE at the moment. A couple of things. One is that they have asked an organisation called Adnodd, which is a resource creating arm of Welsh Government, and they put bids out for people who would like to write resources for good RVE. There's only 2 topics that have gone out for that, and one of them is RVE, so obviously that's really positive. And then the second one is they're trying to get an idea of what schools are doing, so I do think there will be an RVE thematic review from Estin in the near future.
Any connections with Estin at all, so that they are aware of the problems involved through SACRES or WASACRE or whatever?
Yes, there is a named person within Estin. She's moving on, and somebody's new's moving in. So yeah, we have got a specific RVE contact within Estin.
But that might be of help.
Yeah.
Claire, before we move on, somebody with experience at this level, have you any thoughts before we move on?
Just to note, Robin did have his hand up as well, Roger.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. Robin.
Thanks, Chairman. Governments and those in authority and holding cabinet levers of power, they love it when people don't speak. They love it when people don't speak up. If we've got information, and I don't know that all of the ins and outs of this, but just what I'm hearing, if we have information that is useful to the public and promotes the presence of RE in schools, we should be releasing it. We mustn't get caught up in other people's agendas. Embarrassment over grades, that kind of thing, is somebody else's agenda, I would suggest. Obviously, we want them to be better, but the fact that there's an availability and an option to speak and learn about RE in schools, I think, is vital, and making that known is really, really important. We mustn't get caught up in other people's concerns about how things are measured or whether things are measured and that kind of thing. If there's something that should be publicly available, we should let it out. Especially this kind of information, it seems to me, would be releasable anyway under an FOI request. So I think that's really important. And I'll just note that in England, for example, there's been a survey by the Bible Society which showed that there was a 40% increase in interest in church and Christianity amongst young people 18 to 24-year-olds. If there's something like that happening, we have a duty to let young people know they can learn more about it in our schools. We're better for them to be able to ask these questions and make these follow these lines of inquiry in the school. We must speak about it in some way.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, Robin, because Phil and I were talking about this a couple of days ago, and the fact that the agenda is actually being driven by people in the 40s and 50s on the whole. And it's the young people, in fact, who are showing interest in spirit. I'm going to use the word spirituality in its widest sense. I think basically because they find themselves in a very, very insecure world in terms of climate change, job. There's a whole range of issues and so forth there, and which is leading them to think much more deeply about, their role in life, probably far more earlier than many of us would have done so. Phil,
Claire
what
has
do
a
you
hand
think?
up, Roger, just to let you know.
Oh, Claire, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, just coming back to the point on Adnodd there, the briefs that they've put out are very, very woolly, and it's very much a case of it depends on who submits what and whether or not they like it as to whether they take it on. So although there was a brief submitted a couple of months ago for people who write resources to produce something with RVE being one of the themes, there was nothing specific in it as to exactly what they wanted. So although it sounds good on paper, I wouldn't rely on them as being the best source of good quality resources on that subject.
Yeah, we'll have to see what's produced. I can't comment on. It's got to adhere to the agreed syllabus. I don't know what the bids would look like when they come into Welsh Government, and I don't know who would be looking at them.
And it just highlights that particularly in the national curriculum, the increased weight that's put on teachers, in fact, to actually produce the materials in the classroom and many of us in the old days would have looked for a really, really comprehensive and well-suited, outline of work in a book or so forth that we could actually refer to. And that's not the way that they see it at the moment, but that puts a massive weight on teachers as well in the development of resources. It really does. Okay. Right, we're going to move on. We need to keep on. That's going to be something that will be in our management plan for the coming year. We're going to keep an eye on this one. Just to ask one question, because it's something I hadn't thought about until you mentioned it, Robin. In terms of a freedom of information request, how would you go about this? It's beyond my experience.
It's very simple. You just write to the institution. Every public institution is bound by law to release information on request unless it falls within certain categories. For example, commercial sensitivity would be one, or privacy of individual details. But within the legislation, there's lots of different things. So, for example, I could write to Conwy Council and say, please release to me every single piece of information you hold about me. And then they're under a legal duty to respond to the inquiry within, I think it's 21 days, and then to provide a reasonable response to say, look, this is the information we hold, this is how you can have it, within another time period. So anybody could write to a local school or to a local education authority and say, I would like to know what the information is about grades or achievement levels in the over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, and the school would have to provide it. They wouldn't provide identifiable level information. That's one of the restrictions. So they wouldn't provide any information that would yield the name of individuals. So, for example, they might argue if there's only 3 pupils on a particular course, if they publish the grades, then it might be conceivably identifiable. But as a whole, at a county level, and if our agenda is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if our agenda is raising the profile of religious education, religious studies, then publishing at a county-wide level or even a national level, it's not identifiable, so it should reasonably be satisfied. Others may know differently and precise wrinkles of the actual legislation, but it's as simple as writing a letter.
Just right. Well, certainly all the information we've had previously, when we were receiving this kind of information, was school identifiable. It was not individual identifiable at all. So maybe, Phil, in that meeting you could have with Gwenno, that we actually raise this as a pressure point. Okay, if you're not prepared to do it, we'll put in a freedom of information request.
Yeah, I think they will do. I think we need to tread carefully in terms of our relationship with the local authority. I would rather keep positive interaction with them rather than putting their back up, because I think if we start doing that, then they might become a little bit more guarded in other requests that we put in. So I think the relationship is really important. Let's request the data first, and then from that conversation we can decide what we're going to do next.
Robin?
Yeah, just to respond to that, because this is exactly the scenario you run into every time, everywhere, at every level of government I've been involved in. There's always this, we must respect the relationship. We do, but we're adults, and those adults have assertive, proactive relationships. They're not, we mustn't be afraid of doing things or saying things that other people don't wish us to say or do. Otherwise, we'd never, ever get anything done. We can be polite, we can be informed, we can be reasoned. Whether or not they like what is said is a different matter. But being polite, informed, and reasoned, I think, is the supportive role that a group like SACRA should be making in its relationship with the local authority.
I think what Phil is possibly, there's an underlying sort of situation with regard to what Phil is saying, and it comes out, in fact, in the recommendations that we will make in our management review, and that is the funding. You might recall that Phil was the advisor for the authority, had a full-time post, and that was discontinued, which left us in a position when I took over as chair from here, that in fact we couldn't actually, with any integrity, say that we had any knowledge of what was going on in schools. And therefore, that's why I produced the initial management plan, which brought in a conversation with the local authority through Lowry, who was very supportive and has actually provided funding for Phil to come in as a consultant, but from a whole series, I don't know which pocket she actually raised, and that's, I'm not quotable on that, by the way, to actually continue to support our work. But there is a certain amount of tenuousness with regard to that, which I think, you know, Phil was actually kind of very, very aware of in the comments that he was making. Okay, I'm going to move on then with regard to that. We've got a recommendation and we'll follow that one through. Right, well, one of the big things that we have this year, I hope we've had time to read it, because first of all, I want to thank Phil. The bulk of the work, I know I did the introduction, but the bulk of the work, in fact, for this obviously goes through Phil. And you've had a recommendation from, well, you would normally get a recommendation from us that this report is accepted. But just to highlight, if you looked at the management plan, which is still in existence at the moment and which is out there in the report, the areas in green, and we use a proper system of colours now, are the things we've actually achieved. The items in yellow are the ones that are still ongoing, and the ones in red are the ones which I think we're dropping out. We feel, oh, they're not appropriate any longer, basically. So that's just to illuminate, maybe you're looking at that management plan, which is an integral part of the report. What I would like to say is that, just a few things that I outlined in my introduction, that some of the key issues that I see coming up during the coming year is that I think you need to be looking about, from within this, producing a new chair by the time of next year. And I want us this year, and feel free to propose, that we look at ways of maybe involving more of you in some of the decisions that are made and some of the issues that we take forward as well. And we just talked about the skills suite here. That would be a classic example that we could actually choose. I'm also concerned as well, because of the pressures on school, that the head teachers support the training and sharing of opportunities. We're providing an enormous amount of training through Phil, and opportunities and materials and resources, but particularly for the teacher network, where teachers come together as well in different clusters. I think it's really important that the head teachers support their staff in actually going to those meetings where good expertise is shared. So that for me is going to be an ongoing issue. I do think we need to continue to raise the profile of this organisation, because I said to you 2 years ago, when I addressed the secondary heads, very few of them really knew what we were about, and we've got a plan for that, as you know. Collective worship, of course, which we'll take next steps forward later in this meeting, is a crucial one. But we had a meeting with regard to the management plan. We had a group of us who were asked to do that, and we will come back to you at the next meeting. So that will be looking at all our plans and our targets for the coming 3 years, probably, will be part of that meeting, and that will be important. And again, this whole issue of the skills suite and key stage 4 provision. So I personally would see those. But Phil, you'd take us through the rest of it before we
through the annual report.
Yeah.
It has been presented. If there are any questions or concerns, please raise them now. A few years ago, we decided that we wanted to make the annual report as accessible as possible and to make sure that it draw teachers in. So we put lots and lots of examples of resources and things that clickable active links that people can use to draw on resources that are useful for their schools, as well as obviously reporting on our activities as a SACRE. So the first major section of that obviously has got lots and lots of links to external and supportive material. But if there are any concerns or questions, it's not really a point for discussion in terms of we wouldn't be discussing collective worship as a result of that. It's a conversation that we had in the previous year's worth of Sacre business. So it's more about the accuracy of the report itself.
Well, a lot of work has actually gone into that, and it's not for discussion, as Phil said, but any inquiries for elucidation or things that you weren't sure about when you read that very comprehensive document? Okay, well, I'm presumed that we will accept that at the next meeting. Okay, well, the next item 11, we've actually discussed already the whole issue of our relationship with the National Centre for Religious Education for Wales quite comprehensively in matters arising, and we will aim, certainly during the course of the year, aim to develop that, and I hope that the suggestions to actually try and get them involved in this particular group. Josh has actually made a presentation to this group previously, which was very, very well received. So are there any further questions with regard to that? Because if not, I'm going to move on, in fact, to the strategic management plan. Okay. Well, you asked a number of us to go away and actually have a look at the plan. This was set up in 2021 when we didn't have a kind of development plan for our working with the authority, with targets and dates and so forth. The dates fell by the wayside to some extent, obviously because of the impact of COVID on schools, but nonetheless we have comprehensively pursued that and have achieved an enormous amount through it. We now reach the point, I think, where, particularly with how I'm going to be departing in the near future, maybe not from the committee, but from the chair, that we need to actually reevaluate where we've got to and produce a new management plan. And we're in the process of that. We've made up the group that met has actually done that already, and we hopefully are able to present that to you at the next meeting for discussion. Phil, do you want to add anything?
Not particularly, I think. Oh yeah, we wanted to keep it simple, or sort of simplify the themes that we were going to focus on. So rather than having sort of 8 separate items with actions individually, we thought maybe just looking at promoting Sacre, collective worship, and religion, values and ethics as 3 major headings. So trying to make it as manageable as possible and sort of quite coherent as well.
Okay, any questions on that? No? Okay. The collective worship. We've already had in this committee a full presentation of the draft collective worship policy, and a group was actually, because it's such a fundamental part of what we do, in theory it's 50% of what we do, supporting collective worship in schools, and you will all know and be aware, of course, that Phil's produced all these resources, which have been well received by those secondary head teachers who have actually seen them. And the draft collective worship policy, in fact, was shared, wasn't it, Phil, with secondary heads?
Yeah.
And they liked it. However, because it was such, in some ways, it can be, given Robin was talking about secularism coming at us in the other direction, it was felt that we really make sure that we got this completely buttoned up. So we had a small group that went away from this committee and looked at it. They came back with a recommendation. That wasn't fully accepted. And basically, our humanist member, in fact, had actually asked us to, who was part of that working group, had asked to change part of the definition, which, if you look at the document you've actually got, is section 2, what is collective worship? And it read in the report that we provided to you last time, it must in some sense reflect something special or separate from ordinary school activities and should be concerned with values as represented by reverence and or veneration paid to a divine being power. And what we've done is we've amended that, and you've got the amendment, and it should be concerned with understanding the reverence and or veneration paid to a divine being or power and the values it represents. So making it very clear that in terms of collective worship, that there is an underlying understanding of the possibility of a divine power. I hope that will meet with your, with the criticisms that came in at the end of the last meeting, because we'd like to take this forward. We can't agree on it today, but we'd agree just about everything except this short definition at this point. So it'd be helpful if you're happy with that. It's in green on the policy that you've been said. If you'd like to make some comments and express your happiness or with what we've produced, because we'll proceed on using that anyway, irrespective of any acceptance that's taken place at this meeting. James.
Just to say, it looks good to me. Very happy with that.
Yeah. Okay, it would just be helpful in terms of taking this forward, even though we've got no, vote on this. If you're happy with what we've actually written there as part of that amendment, could you just indicate now by putting your hands up? Because we would find that helpful. Right. Okay, oh, right, Sue as well. Okay, that's great. Okay, well, thank you very much for that, and we'll proceed on that basis. And thanks again to the working group that actually worked on that. That's appreciated. Okay. Your newsletter, Phil.
Yep. So in the summer, I was able to go to a religious education conference in Budapest held by the European Forum of Teachers of RE. I'm the Welsh representative on the board for that organisation. The conference was looking at ensuring that learners felt that they belonged, I suppose, to the school and to the subject, or how can we support that? And we had three fantastic keynote presentations, and I'll sort of very briefly go over them. I mean, you can see them in the newsletter, but it felt that the newsletter was ideal to talk about the conferences that I'd been on, almost like a bit of a post-summer newsletter edition. And so there was also the ARIAC conference that I attended, and I just wanted to make sure and almost raise the profile for teachers of both those organisations. But the Budapest conference was definitely a highlight for me. I arrived on St. Christopher's Day, and we went down to the Danube and watched fireworks on the Danube. But a colleague of mine hinted a bit sarcastically, and he said that, isn't it funny that across Europe we celebrate, or there is a celebration of Saints' Days, and in the UK we've replaced Saints' Days with bank days because we celebrate the banks. And I found that quite humorous. But yeah, to arrive on St. Christopher's Day and sort of see the melee along the Danube was definitely a cultural and liked it. So it was brilliant. The conference itself focused on the first keynote speak. One of the things I say about X-Ray is it always amazes me how different religious education is practiced across Europe. So across Europe, the predominant focus of RVE or RE would be confessional. So there would be a confessional slant. The church has a huge input, or the churches, sorry, or all religious organizations really have a huge input into creating curricula for the schools, whether that's a state school or not. And a child will possibly opt for a state non-confessional RE, but the majority will be provided through confessional religious education, which I think is where it's very different to the way that it's delivered in the UK. That being said, the keynote speeches were very much relevant for everybody. So the first one was a conversation around questioning. Now, I think that RE is a subject where we would engage and support and encourage children to ask questions. But when you look at the research on questioning in the classroom, I think the statistics bear out that one child in a 40-minute lesson will ask 0.6 of a question, which is ridiculously low. But when you reflect on how many questions a teacher asks in the same period, it's anywhere between 80 and 300 questions. So teachers are just firing questions out all the time, and learners are having the opportunity to ask one question, well, half a question in a 40-minute period. I mean, if you think that you've got 30 learners in the classroom, that's probably about 15 questions between them, or I don't know, 18 questions between them in a 40-minute period. But I sort of pride myself in that RE is a subject in which I'm asking children to ask questions and to critically analyse and think about the text that they're looking at. And when I heard that, I just, you know, it's quite an eye-opener. So it's just a reminder, really, for teachers to provide opportunities for children to ask questions, to critically analyse, maybe even model what good questions would look like. The other thing was that of the questions that teachers ask, a lot of them are fixed on the knowledge, and they're an assessment of like a child's learning. So you're going to sort of ask, who did this? When did they do that? It's very rare that you ask, why did somebody do something? So the questions are concrete, looking for concrete answers rather than looking for reasoning, which I found really interesting. The second keynote speak was talking about existential questions. And I suppose this goes down that sort of secular divide. Once upon a time, if you are within a tradition, you're talking about death, you're talking about existential questions, you're talking about meaning and purpose from within the context in which you're living. As children are not necessarily having those conversations, they're not getting the literacy to discuss these big issues, and then anxiety around big world problems and concerns and war and famine and all of that. There isn't a contextual framework in being able to talk about that can bring on anxiety. And so the conversation or the keynote speech was, how can religious education classroom contribute into a pupil's literacy to be able to discuss these big existential questions, and then reduce you know, the mental health crisis that came after COVID, because children aren't able to discuss their fears and their concerns. Actually, religious education can provide language for children to be able to have that conversation. And I thought that was really interesting. And then we had a keynote speech from a Muslim researcher from Bonn University in Germany, and she was talking about Muslim and Jewish relations and how an understanding of the history. And surprisingly, she was talking about maybe a Muslim's understanding of their own history, and maybe misconceptions that are peddled within Muslim communities could actually change Muslim and Jewish relations. And she really focused on the monotheistic focus that Muhammad would have had once he'd received the Quran. And when he came down after receiving his the recitation, that actually what he wanted was to align with other monotheistic faiths in the region, and yet they weren't necessarily as welcoming as they possibly could have been in this promotion of a monotheistic belief within a very sort of pluralistic context, which I found really fascinating. But I also felt that maybe it's not my place to then explain to a Muslim child how maybe misunderstandings in a Muslim history would impact on their experiences, because I felt that would be very colonial, me telling somebody else what they should believe, and we've done that for years, and I didn't think that's particularly appropriate. So actually taking that from, well, what can I do about it in my classroom? I didn't think there was a huge amount, but I was talking with Roger. I've done a newsletter item for an organisation that I work for or support, and it was that conversation between confessional and non-confessional, and actually that seemed much more appropriate from within a confessional Islamic education rather than from a pluralistic, objective, critical sort of external, which is really interesting because I hadn't thought of that before, because I've only ever taught RE from outside a confessional model, but actually it felt more appropriate from within a confessional model. So that was interesting. But we then, and I'll finish with this, we did visits to various places around Budapest. One of them was to a Muslim, they call him an invader because of the Turkish sort of, they call them non-years within Budapest. It's sort of a non-history. There were these Christian kings, then the Turks or the Ottoman Empire took over, and then they got rid of the Ottoman Empire and these Christian kings came back in again, and we've got Hungarian history, and it feels like that period is non-history within the Hungarian, which is a bit weird. And then I visited the largest synagogue in Europe, and adjacent to it is the ghettos that the Nazis used in World War II. And it's a real shame because the Nazis, they didn't invade necessarily because Hungary was already a fascist state. But what they weren't happy with was the way that they were dealing with the Jews in the country. So they took administrative role in late 44 and sent huge numbers of Hungarian Jews off to Auschwitz. And it's really sad. So it was that. And at the time, well, it continues, but we've got the problems in Israel and Palestine continuing. And it's just, yeah, the history just repeating itself and repeating itself. In the museum, there's a quote from Ecclesiastes that talks about there is nothing new under the sun. And then this Jewish poet at the end of World War II said, but that ceased as a result of the Holocaust. And it just reminded me that, no, it didn't cease at the end of the Holocaust. It just continues and continues. Mm-hmm. And it's one of my passions for why we teach RE in the first place, is to try and gain an understanding of other people and other people's cultures, that actually we're asking the same questions. The answers might be different, but actually the longing to find those questions is human. And that is something that unites us all. So that is one of the passions for me teaching RE in the first place. Mm-hmm. But an amazing conference. Really, really important. How much you can draw on it, the questioning definitely, the existential questions definitely, but maybe telling other people how to believe what they believe, don't know. I feel a little bit uncomfortable with that one.
Okay, thanks, Phil. You obviously had a very stimulating time at that conference. Just a couple of thoughts on that as well. One of the things that I was always hoped for, that although we don't deliver confessional RVE in our schools at all, the importance and the contrast there was with this factual, this understanding of history in terms of facts and so forth. I think the whole area of questioning within RVE and encouraging questioning by students is absolutely crucial. It's something that we certainly did in the pioneering work at my own school on that particular issue. And just one other thought, and just a reminder, RVE in the UK is statutory. We actually have to provide it. And I heard a lot of teachers saying, well, what's so special about RVE? English history, history, geography, why is RVE so special? And we need to hold on to that as well. And that is our justification for all that we actually do, which is why we provide an agreed syllabus, which they have to have regard for. But I think that's to hold on to that. We might not be confessional, but still there is statute saying that RVE has to be delivered, which is why that issue at Key Stage 4 is such an important one, because there's a possibility, I only say it's a possibility at this moment, that might not be the case completely. Okay, you actually have had the annual report from WASACA, our national body, and also the minutes of the last meeting. We've touched on some of the issues that they've been dealing with in terms of lobbying and so forth. They dealt with a lot of issues like funding and finance as well. But any questions on that report coming out of the report that you've actually been sent? No, okay. Well, the last thing that I suggest that what we'd like to do, we've got this meeting at 10 o'clock on the 19th, which is a Washington meeting. We always have one or two representatives at least at that meeting. I normally attend, and I will attend on this occasion as your chair. But I'd like somebody else to join me on that. Anybody like to volunteer?
Sorry, Roger, I normally attend, albeit they don't always put me down for Conwy. They put me down for Denbighshire this time, but I tell them I'm on 3, but they only ever put me down once. Unfortunately, I can't. I'm in school that morning for a nesting feedback.
Right, okay. Anyone else? Well, it looks as though I'm going to be on my own.
And me.
With you, Phil. Yes, of course. Okay, well, thanks again, everybody. And I would like just to leave one thing. I'm very conscious sometimes, particularly when people are new on board, that you've got a lot to take, a lot to come to terms with when you come to your first meetings and so forth. And that kind of almost discourages discussion. But if any of you got suggestions, I know James has made this point to me in the past, of making our SACRE more involving for all the members who attend, I gratefully receive them. So just drop me an email. We're very, very happy to have those. And thank you indeed, all of you, for attending. And we look forward to seeing you next time. And Sally, if you could stay on board when everybody leaves, I'd be grateful. Thank you indeed.
Thank you. Bye now.
See you next time.
Thanks, Chairman.